having a $15 billion surplus is nothing to brag about. That's actually sad.
That is, yeah.
So you're literally saying, I have so much money I could fix every problem in the state, but I'm just choosing not to.
What are we stockpiling the cash for, right? What is that? What is
It's scary, right?
Welcome. Another healthcare story with Healthcare Henry. Today we have Timoria Seba, and she is actually running for House District 68.
That's right.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. We've met a couple times just out and about.
We have.
And you kind of mentioned to me your maternal health struggles.
Yes.
Things that you went through.
Yes.
I want to dig into that today.
Okay, well, come on. Get your shovel. Let's go.
Tell us about it. What happened to you?
Okay. So in 2010, like every mother, I think you go into the hospital, you watch all these TV, you think you have everything prepared. We were prepared, we had everything ready. And we didn't know what we weren't prepared for that day. So my daughter was born in April of 2010, and I had a very long labor. I was in labor for 27 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, we had brought like all these things, the tennis balls, the big bouncy thing for me to sit on, all these things we had brought with us because they were all things that we had learned in childbirth education we need. I remember walking around the floor at one point with the oxygen tank attached, and we're just walking around the hospital. I'm like, oh, it's just like the TV show. Look at us, like, here we go. And I remember walking past this one area, and there were these women under looked like these canopies. And I just stared through this little window, and a nurse came walking down. I said, oh, are those women okay? They look dead. And she said, yeah, they actually just had C-sections. And I was probably like my 15th or 16th hour by that point, and something clicked in my brain like, wow, I didn't realize a C-section was this type of a serious surgery.
It's a surgery.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time, and visually it was so jarring to see people in recovery from it, right? So I was like, so all of a sudden I was like, okay. And then I'm thinking, okay, Lord, like, what's going to happen with me today? So anyway, we're still walking around, so finally, my doctor says, okay, looks like you're dilated enough. We're gonna start. I go, okay, great. And I had what I would call, I guess, like a pretty normal delivery, from that point. I just thought, okay, my daughter's born. And right afterwards, I could see the shift in the energy in the room. That was the first thing I noticed. So I'm laying there and I'm being cleaned up. I'm watching my daughter get cleaned up. Mm-hmm. And I can see everybody's energy start to shift. But what I also could see was the reflection in the TV, because the TV had been turned off. And I always joke about I had been watching Seinfeld right before I gave birth. And I said, can somebody turn off the TV? I do not want my memory of me giving birth to be like looking at George Costanza's face right now. So please turn off the TV. So I remember I was looking at the TV and I could see everybody staring at everybody else and kind of getting a little antsy. Mm-hmm. And I was watching people through the reflection gather tools and kind of make these little gestures at each other. So I was like, what's going on? So within a few minutes, my doctor, I refer to him as Dr. B, but he doesn't mind if I say his name. It's Dr. Mark Brescia in New Jersey.
Okay.
He was a great guy.
Good.
But what a lot of people don't realize, and we'll talk about this later, he was actually the third physician I saw during my pregnancy. I didn't meet him until 28 weeks. So anyway, so he says, Timoria, I'm going to let you know. He said, you're having some bleeding, and I'm going to massage on your uterus to try to get it to contract to stop the bleeding. And I said, okay, and it was so painful. Plus, I was exhausted. It had been 27 hours.
Right.
I was tired.
Right.
So he's massaging, and I mean, his hand is up in there. I mean, it was like up to here in my body, So the bleeding wouldn't stop. So then he says to me again, Timoria, I'm going to need to have Bob and Gigi leave the room now while I talk to you for a bit. So that's my husband, Bob, and my daughter, Gigi. So they leave, and he says, okay. He said, you're having a hemorrhage, and I have to call a specialist and a surgeon to come in. Now, he should be here within 15 minutes. When he comes, he's going to tell you some really scary things, but he says, don't believe anything he's saying. He's like, we're going to get through this.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him point blank, Henry, I said, Dr. B, just tell me straight. Am I going to die?
You asked that.
I sure did. I said, because if I'm going to die, I want to write my daughter a letter. I said, and I know while I have time, let me do that. He said, you're not going to die. I said, well, how do you know?
Right.
I'm sitting here, and we kind of had that rapport. My personality's, kind of jokey. He said, you're going to be okay. He said, but he is going to come in here and tell you some really scary things. And I said, okay. And sure enough, we lived in New Jersey then. So this guy came from a hospital in New York, very well-known, highly regarded person. He comes in, and the first thing he said was, hey kid, you're in bad shape, but I'm going to do everything I can to save your life.
Wow.
And those were the first words that he said to me.
Scary.
Yeah. And he said, I need to ask you some questions first. And Dr. B didn't leave. He was still there the whole time.
I love Dr. B.
Dr. B, honey.
I need to meet Dr. B. I love Dr. B.
Yeah, actually, I texted him that I was running for office 3 months. He was so excited. Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah. So he said, so the surgeon, he said, the first thing I'm going to try to do is stop the hemorrhage. And I have to do a procedure called an embolization. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. And he said, I need to ask you, do you want to have more children? And I was like, why are you asking me that right now? I was like, he said, I need to know because I might have to give you a hysterectomy if I can't stop the bleeding. And he said, but I'm going to be honest with you. If I can't stop this bleeding, you will die tonight. And so here I am processing that alone. I was by myself with just Dr. B and the specialist, the special surgeon. And so Dr. B, literally he was in the background going,
I really like Dr. B because I think I would have freaked out, right? Yeah.
And I was just eerily calm, but mind you, in the in-between time, I had been throwing up on myself. Where the bile was coming up, I was passing out back and forth.
Sure.
And every time I would close my eyes, I remember it would just be black. And you know how you hear these stories of people when they're like experiencing near death? They're like, oh, I saw my granny, or I didn't see nobody. So I was like, I better see something. I don't want to just go into pitch blackness.
Yes, that is true.
I'm like, anybody there?
Sure. Yeah.
But I just kept hearing a voice that was, keep your eyes open. Do not close your eyes. Keep your eyes open. So I was just focused on that, like stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. But in between, I just kept vomiting, and the blood was still. I mean, it looked like someone who had been through a war zone. Like it was everywhere.
So you actually thought you were going to die?
I did.
I can take.
I did. I think everyone who has this experience, you're hopeful, but you also are feeling your body losing life. And I try to explain to people, if you've never felt your body losing life,
right?
It's very surreal because you are caught. You're so aware of all of the loss, right? And this is what I talk about sometimes with the fact that maternal deaths and this generational trauma that happens, especially because maternal deaths are preventable mostly. I kept thinking, my daughter's not going to ever get to know me. Bob and I had only been married 1.5 years, I think, at that point. And I'm like, I can't, and I can't trust him to do her hair. I mean, all these, all these thoughts. Who's going to teach her how to make a pound cake? I mean, right. All these, things.
Yeah.
But also the things that I felt like I was going to miss out on as a mom, especially to a little girl.
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, man, I'm going to fight. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to do what they tell me to do. So the other doctor, the specialist, the surgeon, he says, we're going to take you down into surgery. And he said, you have to be awake for the whole thing. So, they gave me, I believe it was propofol. So, again, my personality, Henry, I said, they giving me the Michael Jackson drugs. I know I'm bad. I said, I know I'm bad off now. They did brought out the propofol. And, I really was like, I really did. I was like, this is going to be it. So I think I had 2 transfusions.
Okay.
And I always think this is so interesting, too. I'm like, I wish I could meet the people who gave me the transfusions. These people saved my life.
That should be a thing, by the way.
It should be a thing.
I agree.
I really want to thank these people.
We can probably find them.
Yeah, I hope so. All these years later, if
they're,
I would love to just be able to say thank you because you saved my life. You saved my daughters from having generational trauma, right? It would just be an incredible experience to be able to do that. So anyway, I go down to the ER or the operating room for the surgery. It was like something out of Grey's Anatomy, where the people in the suits show up and they go behind, like the wall, and they're staring. And so the surgeon starts. Now there's a screen above my head, and I'm completely nude, by the way, and it's freezing cold. And I look down, and you know how when a baby's born, they're covered in white. It's called vernix. They're covered in vernix. So I'm looking at you. You have kids, so you know.
I have one. I have a 4-year-old.
Okay, okay, yeah. So I look down and I'm covered, and I go, "She's with you. You can do this." And I just remember trying to touch it so I could feel just something from my daughter. So I'm looking up at the screen, and every time the surgeon is making a stitch, he goes, "You feel anything?" And I would say no. And he goes, "Okay, good." And there's something psychological that actually clicked then that I look back on.
Interesting.
It was like, if you start to feel something, this is bad. But both mental and physical, which would be an important piece for me later on. Because I think that people don't realize sometimes what a patient is absorbing from the time they step into the hospital all the way through. All the sounds, the beeping, the blue gown. Or you can't get me in one of them blue gowns now. I'm like, honey, I bring my own gown if I gotta go. I go turn off the TV, put a cover on the TV.
I say this all the time. Yeah, I agree.
Like it's, we are processing from that time we step in. So anyway, 3.5-hour surgery I have to be awake for. And I had 2 great nurses too who were with me the whole time. They were great too. They were staying overtime because they had been with me for 28 hours at that point. So they were gonna stay with me the whole time. They were wonderful. So the surgery's complete. Now here's where you're gonna you said you love Dr. B, you're really gonna love him now.
Okay. So
he whispers to me, he said, "Okay, we made it through this." He said, "They're trying to take you back to the ICU, but I said, no, she needs to be with her baby, and they're fighting me on it." So they were all huddled in a corner talking about getting me to the ICU. So he says, "We're going to go back to labor and delivery." He said, "They're going to come over and ask you how you're feeling." And he says, "You just wave like you won the Miss America pageant." And I was like, okay. I was like barely alive. Okay. So here they come.
Right.
Timoria, how are you feeling after the surgery? And mind you, my husband wasn't with me. He was still with Gigi in the nursery. We had to say goodbye right before that surgery. So anyway, so they asked me, how are you feeling? And I go, and I didn't realize I didn't have a voice left. And I go, "I'm great." And I realized my voice was gone. So I just started giving a thumbs up and just tried to make her smile as much as I could. And I was hurting. I was hurting. So they go and talk some more. Dr. B takes the bed. He takes the bed, unlocks it, and starts heading towards the elevator.
So he's rolling you.
He's rolling out of the operating room. And we go to the elevator. And it was like a scene out of a movie. Me, him, and one nurse, and they're pressing the button
to close it.
And here come the other people, and they're like, and the doors literally closed.
Oh my gosh.
And we're going back up now to the room that I was in.
Where your baby is.
Yeah. So when I got up there, immediately I see one of my best friends from back home. So we're in New Jersey. I grew up in Maryland, as you know. So I see one of my best friends who's like, a petite brunette white girl.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Erica.
Okay.
So I'm like, she's like, I said, "How'd you get here?" I mean, this is the first, I'm like looking around, I'm barely coherent. She's like, "I told them I was your sister." She said, "Everything's so PC now. What were they going to say?"
Now I got to meet Erica.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. So, so we go. So now everybody's going into the room where I was on the delivery floor, right? So then my sister-in-law shows up, so everyone's there. And one of the nurses comes in, a different nurse, and she's lighting everybody up. Don't talk to her. Don't say anything. She's in very fragile condition. She's like, she even looked, she said, "I don't even want you to wiggle your toes." She's like, "That's how serious this is." Sure. Now that we're getting to know each other, my personality. So I'm literally like taking the toe, like, I mean, so my sister-in-law leaves. Erica's staying with me. She doesn't want to leave me. We were, again, it's like a sister to me. Like, so there was no way, she was going to leave. Bob was back and forth between me and Gigi and making sure that I was okay, but then going back to the nursery. And, hey, I was just like, I'm just trying to live.
I'm just trying to live.
Just
Yeah.
trying to
No.
get through this
Yeah.
thing, right? So Dr. B comes in and he says, okay, he's like, you're good for the night. He's like I said, he's like, you're going to be okay. He's like, everybody has my number. He's like, I'm going to go home for a couple of hours to get some rest. I'm
Right.
right back first thing in the
Sure.
morning.
Sure.
And I said, okay, surgeon comes in. He said, you made it through the surgery. Great. He said, I'm going to check on you in the morning as well. I said, okay, great. So the nurse, though, I mean, she was parked at the end. She was mean mugging us, too. So she said, I'm going to the bathroom. She said, now look, like I said, don't move, don't talk, no nothing. We said, okay, it was like, I'm not going to do anything. I mean, I could barely do anything. Erica, and again, this is kind of stuff we would do at school, too. So she said, are you thirsty? I said, yeah, I'm dying. I'm real thirsty. She's like, what do you want? I said, what they got? She's like, they got a Coca-Cola. I said, okay. I'm like, she won't know if I have something to drink. So I hadn't had anything to eat or drink for, it was like 20 hours.
Yeah, it's been a while.
I sucked that Coca-Cola. The nurse comes in. She's like, how's everything going? I said, oh, I'm good. So, she said, y'all didn't do anything? I said, nope. Not even 40 seconds later, I threw up the entire Coca-Cola. She was like, I knew it. She's like, I told you. She's like screaming. So I was like, all right, I'll be good. So the next morning, of course I couldn't sleep. And this was also the beginning of sort of this mental thing that I had for a long time where I was afraid to sleep for a long time.
So this is before the surgery. You were like this?
I would say, no, after. So,
after.
Yeah,
this is
before,
PTSD?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed with PTSD within, a couple months after this. So the next morning, I was just happy to be alive, but I was in so much pain. It was like the realization sort of all these crazy things happened to me over the last day and a half. I had a baby. I had to have a life-saving surgery. My body was just having all these weird reactions to things. I just felt so sick, but I was happy to be alive. So I remember Bob, my husband, he came in with Gigi, and he said, she's been throwing up the milk. Because she was on a bottled milk because I couldn't breastfeed.
Sure, yeah.
So the nurse wanted to know if I could try feeding. And I had no problem. Gigi latched on, and that was nice because I was able to bond because I felt like I had missed out on that first initial bonding.
Yeah.
And I was so upset.
Oh, wow.
I was like, really, that really bothered me, But then it made me reflect back on those moms that I had seen with the C-section. Same sort of thing happens. They have to spend that time in recovery. So again, and when I met moms who had C-sections later, we had a lot of similarities in how we felt about the beginning of our birth experience.
That's so interesting. How was Bob throughout all of this? Because
I think a lot of times people forget about the men.
Yeah.
And so I always say we got to remember that,
it's traumatic for him. It's not the same.
Traumatic.
It's not the same.
It's not the same, but you're watching this happen, right? So you're experiencing the same thing, but in a different way. So at the same time, we went from the best day of our lives, like leaving the house and packing. I remember, I was like, pack me 2 chicken sandwiches to eat, Bob. Because I heard you can't have anything to eat. And he did it, we packed up our food.
Yeah.
We were so excited. And we said that classic thing, we're leaving as 2, coming back as 3. We left as 2 and came back. It was like 2 and a half, 1 man down. It was like, something went wrong with mommy. We got to try to put Humpty Dumpty back together.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it was bad. So Bob always describes it as literally the best and worst day of his life. So all the anticipation, you know how it is after you get married, that, you go from the whole season of engagement to wedding to everyone asking when you're going to have your baby. And we that was that whole trajectory for us, right? So we had sort of this 2 to 3 year period of it was almost like just too perfect, like in a way. And then this happened. And I think that for him, it was more about how do I still maintain stability while managing my own trauma. He had to figure out, how can I, as a husband, maintain stability and peace, also offer some comfort while managing my own trauma.
That's deep. And you recognize that. You recognize that early on. Like that's what he was experiencing.
I did. But because I had gone through so much and I was the person who experienced the trauma, I was like, good luck with your trauma.
Yeah,
I've got to try.
I think that's reasonable. You almost died, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
And
reasonable.
So when we eventually came home 5 days later, and there's some other funny bits in here too. Like one of my friends showed up with a coworker and a cheesesteak sub for me from Philly. Like I mean,
Actually, from Billy.
I mean,
Okay.
it was like my room was like my father-in-law showed up one day. I was in the bathroom. He's like, "Hey, we're here." I mean, there was just a lot that went in. But so when we got home, that I remember sort of the period of right before we were about to go home and sign the paperwork, and I was afraid to go home because the hospital was kind of like the safety place because I was now processing how much bleeding. When you see your whole body covered in blood, the physical experience of the vomit hitting my skin. I remember I cut my hair. I always have had long hair. And I remember I cut my hair super short right after because I could feel the line of where I had vomited. And it bothered me every time my hair brushed across that line of my skin. Yep. So I got a haircut within a couple weeks of being home. Went straight to hair, just like cut it all off. I can't take this feeling anymore because every time it brushed across, I just felt the vomit again.
And it wasn't the actual violence because it reminded you of the experience.
Exactly. Exactly. I was just, as soon as I felt that hair hit right across here, I just saw myself vomiting and again, like the losing life. Literally, it's so hard. And it's when I started telling my story, a lot of veterans reached out to me, and I remember going in a Facebook group. They were like, "Come in our Facebook group and tell your story." It's very similar to how we feel because I couldn't find resources and support. So that was like the first group of people who could kind of relate. And Dr. B, we were home maybe a day or two after, and he would call me, check up on me often. So he calls me this one day and he said, "Timoria, how you feeling?" And I said, "I'm good. I was just at the computer holding Gigi," and I was in like a daze. He said, "Good." He said, "Describe to me like your routine." So I was like, "Well, I'm getting about maybe 45 minutes to an hour a night of sleep because I'm up, every hour with her, this and that." And he said, "Are you thinking about what happened?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I can't." I said, "I don't want to sleep."
Right.
He said, "Well, that's not good." He said, "That sounds horrible." He said, "That is not good."
I would agree.
So he said, "I want you to come back in." He said, "We're going to talk about PTSD." He said, "I think you have PTSD." Yep. And he said, "I want you to start seeing someone right away to talk about this."
I love Dr. B.
Yeah.
This is
old school
amazing.
Italian guy, right? Like this, like very, just on top of it. So I went in to see him and we talked about exactly what those symptoms are. And I had them all. And mostly what I told him was I would cry, I would sit there and just sob and go, "Dr. B, I don't want to sleep because I think I won't wake up. I think I'm going to wake up. Or if I do, I'm going to be in a pool of blood or I won't wake up at all."
It's like a nightmare.
Yeah, all of it. All of it, just replaying the whole thing constantly. So he gave me a list of therapists, and I tell patients this all the time, especially now on the advocacy side. I always say, don't do what I did in the beginning. Pick the person closest to your house with the best credentials. That might not be the best method.
How did you find Dr. B?
Okay, so I had been going to a doctor. We lived in northern New Jersey.
Okay.
And I was working in the city at the time. So I found a doctor close to my job who had, again, like I always look for the best people who are highly recommended, whatever. And so I found a practice that was very highly regarded. And I think at the time, actually, one of my sister-in-laws was going there. And the other half of my family is actually Middle Eastern. They can check off a white box if they want to, but I'm like, y'all don't look white. Y'all Middle Eastern. Y'all tan, y'all brown. But anyway, so I had a much different experience every time I went. I had heard all these great things, but when I would go, I faced a lot of questions that I know that other people weren't getting. They would like, are you married? Or even like, are you still married? Is your husband the father of your baby? These were questions.
That's what they would ask you.
Yes.
Is your husband the father of your baby?
Yeah. And so this was the first trimester. The final straw for me, Henry, was one day I was getting some test results back. They didn't tell me that I had placenta previa early on. And they also had done a test for sickle cell. And I happened to just see it on the paper because I'm nosy, honey. If you put something in front of me in the office,
as you should be.
So I saw that my file was on the exam room table, and I'm waiting for the doctor to come in. So I said, oh, let me see what's on
Sure.
it. So I see this. It literally said African American sickle cell test negative. And I was like, they didn't tell me they were giving me this test. What is this? So when the doctor comes in, I asked her, I said, why did I get a sickle cell test? She said, oh, we give it to all of our Black patients because Black people have higher rates of sickle cell than others. And I said, well, first of all, that was the first time I'd even heard that, right?
Right.
Because I wasn't a healthcare advocate back then.
Sure.
And then the second thing was, I'm like, you just single out Black people for certain things. You're not going to tell them, you're not telling people. So that was the beginning of this, and realizing for me, there are things happening to certain segments of the population, namely Blacks, that aren't happening to others. And things were really starting to click with me then. So I decided to switch doctors then, because I was like, this doesn't feel like a safe space for me anymore.
Interesting, though, because you go from that one and you don't go to an African-American doctor. You said an Italian doctor.
Yeah, so he was the last one. So at the time, I wasn't really thinking about race at all. I was just looking at credentials. Really, that was my focus. I was like, where'd you go to school? And what are your ratings on Yelp?
Sure. I'm not mad at that. I like Google reviews. I'm be honest. I like it.
Google reviews, right? I wasn't, I guess back then I really wasn't thinking I should be seeking out, especially living in that area. I wasn't really thinking like I really should be focused on a Black healthcare provider, because I had a Black a primary care doctor.
Okay.
So anyway, then we move on to number 2. So again,
this is a lot.
Yeah, highly regarded. Again, great reviews, great this, great that. I would be waiting in that office 3 to 4 hours to be seen, watching other people come in and come out. And my mother came down to visit during one of these periods of time. And if you think I'm something, she's like me times 10 million.
Really?
She's always like, I don't know where you came from. She's like, did you really come out of my body? Because you got so much more patience than me, and this and anything. But, she's a nurse practitioner. She came down, she was visiting, and I had to play it cool in front of her, because this is when I actually found out that I'd had placenta previa, and no one had told me. I literally went into the doctor's office eventually after I was seen, and she said, oh, I'm happy to tell you don't have placenta previa anymore. And in front of my mom, I just played it off, because I knew my mom would just explode if I, so I was like, oh, thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Meanwhile, I was like dying inside. The other thing that was happening at the time was this practice was affiliated with St. Vincent's Hospital in New York, which was being threatened by being closed. They were facing some closures. It was a very highly regarded hospital, because they had gotten New York through the AIDS crisis in the 80s and 90s. And so they were... but we had been on a tour with other families, and the doctors kept kind of trying to play it like everything's going to be okay. I tell you, something just kept saying, this won't be good for you. Start looking for another doctor now. So again, I had went through a few visits, I guess my whole second trimester, really. And it was the same sort of stuff again. Just the long wait time, sort of weird questions that I'm like,
questions like the first person.
Yeah, almost like I was like, this doesn't feel like a safe space for me.
Yeah.
So 28 weeks. And it was mostly because I thought that hospital was closing and I got nervous.
Sure.
28 weeks, I started looking for another doctor. Everyone kept saying no. Sorry, we don't take people this late.
Because it was too late.
Yeah. So I happened to call over to Dr. Brush's practice. He said, yeah, come on in.
He answered the phone.
So I came in. I remember when we met. He's funny because, he's tall, he's good looking, and he's also very monotone.
Okay.
And I remember being like, you got some pep in your step? I would ask him, like, you like being a doctor? Like, you look, like, so we would kind of have, he's like, and that's the first question I asked him. I said, do you like your job? Do you like women? Do you like people? Because I had been through so much. I decided to just be very bold in my language now, which is something, and most people who know me as an advocate, that's what they know. That I'm very bold in my language.
I agree.
And it started then, because I really wanted to know, if I want to get this over with now, like a date. If we're not feeling each other now, let me just go.
Oh, you're one of those people. It's like, it's basically like speed dating for you,
Yeah,
right?
it
You're
was.
in and out. Okay, I
Yeah.
got you.
His practice was great. So he has a very multicultural practice too.
Okay.
So he might be the person you see the most, but you kind of move through the whole practice. His cousin worked there as well. They had a black doctor named Dr. Chen, who's amazing, Yale educated and trained. So it was a great place. The staff was diverse. So I felt safe. I was like, this is a safe place. So that is how we met. And when you think about it, from 28 to Gigi came a week and a half early. So the relationship was really short,
Right.
28 to 38, 39 weeks.
I would not have guessed that. I thought you would known him for a lifetime the way he treated you.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is really how, what happened with us was, I think what we were able to do was sort of define what a patient and doctor relationship could truly look like, what it should look like, what it should feel like. It should feel collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
You should feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
You should feel safe. You should feel like it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to not know something.
Mm-hmm.
And you should feel like you're walking away understanding exactly where you are in your health journey. And that's what he was able to do for me. And then on his side, he would say, I helped him understand a patient's perspective more.
Mm-hmm.
What is a patient really thinking when they go into the hospital to give birth?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you walk in, them dings and bells, that's it. And forget it. When they put you on the heart monitor, and you're hearing 2 heartbeats,
right.
and I'm like, is hers okay? Is mine okay? Is her? I would
right.
be like doing that. So we really, I think, shifted. I think we both. It was a mutual respect for each other, and it was right then and there for me that I went, everybody should be having this type of experience.
I love that.
So we knew that after that birth, we talked a lot about the recovery and the focus on healing. And so when I first started going to therapy, it was a horrible experience.
This was for the PTSD, or
this was sort of right before the diagnosis. So this was, I would say, I probably maybe 3 months postpartum.
Okay.
And, he had given me a list of therapists. And like I said, I just chose the closest one in my house, looked up the credentials, and said,
this looks good.
Ivy League? Okay,
I'll try it. Yeah, I'm not mad at that.
It was a disaster. The person was a different race and culture from mine. But also, it felt like an interrogation every time. I mean, hell, this is feeling better than that did. I remember every time I went in, it was just like this bombardment of questions rather than letting me lead with where I was. I literally would say, I'd like to talk about bleeding to death or the surgery itself, right?
Right.
And she would say, well, let me ask you about when you were 6 years old or something that happened. I'm like, everything was great. I got Barbies every weekend with my grandmother.
Right.
And went to IHOP. It was amazing.
And they assumed that because you were a black woman that you had these.
I guess they were expecting some sort of traumas that I needed to. I'm like, the only trauma I needed to process was the almost dying that just happened. That's
a couple months ago.
And again, I'm very upfront. So I'm like, I want to talk about this thing. And I would leave feeling worse than I did when I walked in. I would literally walk out, get in the elevator, and be shaking and crying, because I was just so upset. So I stopped going.
Rightfully so.
I said, I cannot do this. And I told Dr. B, I said, you need to take this person off your list. I said, because I told him, I said, this felt like an interrogation. It was horrible for me. And so I decided to look for someone else. But actually, it took a while. Because by that point, I started going to this mom's group that the hospital would do a couple times a week, I think. So they had 2 groups. One would meet on Tuesday, and that was like, every new mom. You just talk about sort of what your day-to-day life was with being a new mom. Then we called the Friday group was like, did you go through something bad? Because you're going to process that.
Right.
And so, it was interesting because I was kind of in between the 2 worlds. Where I could certainly acknowledge the great parts of motherhood, but at the same time, I had to process, it was hard. And then processing trauma while being a new mom was almost impossible.
Sure.
And I would, put on my face to the world and then go home and just cry my eyes out, be in the shower, start crying. I'd have Gigi in one of the little rocky things. And, when you're adjusting to all the new stuff too, you're like, I remember there's this one picture of us that says encapsulates all of this. Bob took it. I'm holding Gigi and trying to feed her and eating spaghetti at the same time. And it's like, just like struggling.
I need to see that picture.
You have to. It's like the most struggle bus picture of all time.
Uh-huh.
And there are moments I'd be in the shower.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have my foot sticking out of the shower, rocking the bouncer.
We've been there. I've been there. I've been there. Yeah.
But then, and I'd still be like bleeding or something. Like I'd be like,
Yeah.
oh my God,
Yeah.
this is my body, and this, So we were really struggling. And again, I was taking off time from work. So Bob is now trying to work, trying to do all these things, and the Family Medical Leave Act had just been passed, I think. So Dr. B told him, he was like, you're going to need to utilize this new piece of legislation so that you can be home with Timoria more. She can't, you need to say, he's like, I'm going to write a note and we're going to, you need 3 days at home working, so that you can be there for her. So that's something. And again, what doctor is going to tell you about a piece of legislation?
Right.
These are all important things that should be happening for patients, right? Because otherwise you might not find out about it. So again, he educated about mental health, and then he also about some policy that could help our family. So again, before I became an advocate, all these pieces were already starting to naturally come together for me. So about a year after Gigi was born, though, and this was a big shift for me into the advocacy space, I went out to get frozen yogurt with Gigi, a friend, and her daughter. And I started bleeding in the frozen yogurt shop. So I excused myself. I thought maybe I was just, getting my period or something. I go to the bathroom and just blood starts.
It's everywhere.
Everywhere. And I go back to my friend. I said, I'm bleeding again. Dr. Brush's office was 2 blocks up the street from where I was. So we go running out with our kids, pushing the strollers while blood is coming through my pants all the way down. People on the streets are like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with this lady?
Right.
It's like a trail of blood crumbs all the way up to his office.
Oh, you walked from there to the office?
I sure did with the stroller. I mean, we are, because he was 2 blocks up the street. I mean, we are huffing up the street with the strollers.
Right.
And so we get to his office, and there was blood elevator all the way up. I mean, I felt awful. I walked into his office, and I'll never forget. When I walked in, every single woman went like this. It was like because they could tell, oh my God, she's probably having a miscarriage or something. It was like this collective. I can still hear the sounds of them clasping their bellies because the blood. I was bleeding all over the floor.
It was that much blood, and this is now because you've walked 2 blocks.
2 blocks.
So however long that took you to walk with the strollers, with the kids.
Yep, this was May of 2011. So our kids were just like 13 months old, and we got in there. They put me in an exam room, and there's blood just everywhere. I mean, it is everywhere. It's just coming. I'm thinking this is it. And Bob was working in the city, and I'm thinking I'm like, this might be it for me. I don't know what's happening. Maybe something popped from the surgery. I didn't know what was going on. So the hospital was close by, only 4 blocks. They called an ambulance. They took me away. I mean, every time they put me on any new apparatus, it was filled with blood within a few minutes. So get to the ER. This surgeon, not a black person, not surgeon, attending at the ER. He looks at me with absolute disgust. I will never forget this. He takes like a stick of some sort that they use to examine people, but it looked like a popsicle stick almost, but longer. And he parts my legs with the stick, and he's like, ugh. And he's doing like this. Now, remember, Bob wasn't with me. I was by myself. My friend took Gigi and her daughter to her house. Bob was on his way from the city, so it was going to take him some time to get over there to New Jersey. And he's like, ugh, I don't know. We're going to do some tests on you. But he's like, ugh, this is just, it's so bad. Ugh. And he just, and there were like blood clots coming out. It looked like I was probably a gunshot victim. And I remember there was so much blood that it started to crust on my legs. There was crust. Like you could lift it and peel it.
Wow.
So Dr. B, I think either he was out of town or he was somewhere, but his cousin, Dr. Mig, whoever we love too, I was like, okay, I'm getting cousin. He didn't know I didn't know this. So he comes in, he said, Timoria, he said, they've run all the tests. And Bob had come by that point. He said, I'm sorry to tell you, you lost your baby. I had no idea I was pregnant.
You didn't know you were pregnant.
I had no idea. He didn't know that. He felt so bad because he didn't know I didn't know. And I was hysterical. But there were 2 parts of it. I was upset, but then I was also like, I felt like one of those ABC after school specials. We had only had sex one time, and I was like, I knew it was that margarita. I was like, I knew it the one time. It was really I had told Dr. B, I'm not gonna do nothing with Bob. I'm not doing nothing with him. I'm gonna. This has all caused me too many problems.
It's too much trauma.
Yeah.
It's too much trauma.
I'm trying to heal. So I kind of thought about that, and I always, I'm always able to find that humor in things.
Yeah.
Because you have to get through this stuff. But so I had to have another emergency procedure. So I had another emergency procedure called a DNC, dilation and curettage. So, to clean out all the tissue.
Yeah.
So I go home the next day. They kept me for a day. I'll never forget. So we're pushing Gigi home in the stroller. Because, again, it's right in our neighborhood. And I said to Bob, literally that day, I said, I'm done with makeup. I know I'm never going to do makeup again. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing now. No one talks about what's happening to mothers who have experienced all the things that I've experienced, nor families who've experienced what we have as a family.
So that's the moment.
That was the moment.
That was the moment.
That was literally, that was the moment I said, I don't know where this is going to go, but I know I want to help people who've been through the same things.
This is interesting because for me, right, I think someone, you were doing makeup. So you were in the fashion industry.
I was learning. I was here, there, everywhere. I did makeup for the royal family of Qatar. Candace Bushnell who wrote Sex and the City was one of my clients for 4 or 5 years. Models, singers, you name it. I even had an opportunity. I did Mariah Carey's makeup. Oh,
you were a thing.
I had a little thing growing. I'll admit, when I got the call to Mariah, I was like, did every other makeup artist die? They all die because I don't know why I'm getting this call. Now, me and Bob were eating macaroni and cheese and fried chicken in our living room. My agent calls and goes, I need you to go to this address. And everything looked like it did on Cribs too, all color coded and all this, the wardrobe. And she was
immaculate,
the nicest person.
People say that about her.
Truly, we had the best time. She was, the nicest person.
Interesting. So that was your moment. That is the aha.
Yep.
Twice, because this is twice now.
Yeah, so it was back to back. So within 13 months, I had what we described as 2 maternal morbidities, which means the mother lived. Mortality, of course, is when they die. But so I experienced 2 back-to-back maternal morbidities.
Losing that child, though, what was the experience like after that?
I was processing because I'm an only child, and I always knew I wanted to have more than one. My mother's an only child, so I was like, I'm breaking this cycle, baby.
Yeah.
I need some people in my life. And I either was one of those people who's going to have 0 or 4.
Okay.
And I knew that this was now going to limit that, mainly mentally and probably physically. I wasn't sure physically, but I knew mentally I wasn't sure if I would be willing to try again.
Because you weren't that old. You're 33 maybe.
Yeah. Yep. And so I realized that an important piece of it would be how I was going to heal. Because you can't help other people if you don't do the healing yourself. You can't carry your trauma into
starts with you.
The work. Yeah. But I needed to understand what that looked like, what that felt like, right? And so I always still think about who that person was, still to this day. Yeah. I'm like, I wonder, was that our son? We all, and I'm a planner, so I have all the names. On our 3rd date, I told Bob, I was like, this is my daughter's name, so just so you.
Is that actually one of your daughter's names? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Our firstborn, I wrote her name down in my diary when I was 15 years old.
Really?
I sure did. And I told Bob, it was probably it might even be before our 3rd date. He would tell you, he'd probably tell you it was the first date.
How'd you and Bob meet?
We met in New York City at a bar. I went out with a friend who I hadn't seen in a while, another makeup artist, but she worked on soap operas and Law and Order. She worked on that TV show. And he was out with a bunch of his friends one night at the bar across the street. And we kept looking at that place. We looked at the place we went to, me and my friend. We ended up going to this other place. One of his friends walked in, and this bar is almost empty. And he's like, hell, you ladies look good. And we were like, nah, bro. We were like, we're good. Nope. He's like, oh, I got a bunch of guys across the street. I'm going to tell them to come over here and meet y'all. We were like, don't do that. It's not going to be good for you. We don't think that's a good idea. Because my friend, she just come fresh off a relationship and she was just not.
I hate men today. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, but they all came over. And eventually he just walked up to me, kid you not, first thing he said to me, hi, I'm Bob. And I was like, that's your real name? I was like, is it short for Robert? I said, because I'm calling you Rob or Robert. I said, I'm not talking to nobody named Bob. And that's how it started. And then my friend literally said, you're going to marry this guy.
Really? That same moment?
I said, y'all been having too many drinks. Yep. And then she said he already told me. He said, that's my wife right there.
What was it about him that made her say that?
I think Bob, when you meet Bob, everybody loves Bob. It's unbelievable. He's just like a very kind, genuine human who literally goes into everything with the best of intentions.
Yes.
He doesn't want any ill will towards anyone, and he always tries to see the human in each person, you know. And so for me, and he's very loyal, you know, and just like I said, naturally kind. There's never anything, there's no bad intentions ever. And for me, most importantly, he's always let me be myself. He has never once said, oh, your work is, because you work in Black maternal health, it might look bad on my job. You know, there's never any weird stuff like that.
Why would it look bad on his job?
I think that sometimes when you stand for an issue, you know, that sometimes people get intimidated by that, especially when it's something involving race. You know, when you're actually taking a stand, when you are standing 10 toes down on a racial issue, that's a lot to take on publicly. And it has to, and a whole family has to be all in, or it can cause a lot of issues. Sure. You know, and so the one good thing is he has never, not once, had any issue with that. As a matter of fact, I mean, he stands 10 to, obviously, he's standing 10 toes down.
Yeah, he's right beside you. Yeah. He's right beside you. And so now, and the reason why I asked how you met Bob is because I'm wondering, right? I've met Bob briefly. A man who watches his wife go through this twice, right? How is he doing? How has he been impacted? Did he go to therapy? Because to me, that seems like a traumatic experience for him too. What was that recovery like for him?
Yeah, so I think in the beginning, I don't think he had processed his own trauma. I think, you know, most men just say, let me just do what I need to do as a man.
I got to go to work anyway.
I got to work. I got to just focus on, you know, let me make my money, do my thing. As long as, you know, my wife and my child or children have what they need, everything's seemingly good. But he really needed to process what he had seen and what he'd experienced, because when we came back home, there was a lot of difficult feelings in that household, because for me, I'm like, it was more like, you don't know what it's like to die or feel like you're dying. So I had a lot of that energy. Like, you don't understand what I've been through, Bob. You know, you don't know what it's like to feel your body losing life. I do. So almost like this, not meaning to cause him harm, but very accusatory, because he hadn't had the same experience. And I would never want him to, but at the same time, I needed him to understand what I was dealing with based on my reactions to some things that would happen. So he did eventually go. He didn't go until a few years later, but he went, and he said it was the best thing for him, because he finally was able to, first of all, I was telling him too, I'm like, go ahead and say what you want to say about me. You better get all out in front of him and not me, you know. So when you come back, you feel, you know, don't bring me back any, you know, you call me every name in the book when you're in that office, you know. It's a protected relationship, so go for it. I'm not going to call him and go, what Bob say?
Yeah, right.
Okay, I'm gonna light him up when he gets home. Oh, he told you all that? He said, he told you I said that? Because I wanted him to have that freedom, because it's not easy for a spouse. It's not easy for the spouse of a partner, of someone who goes through a traumatic experience. Sure. Because you are, until that person has healed, it is going to be some rough rides in that house for a bit. And it's not, and the person, the person with the trauma is struggling too. We don't want to act a certain way or say certain things, but based on what we've experienced, it's just flying, it's just flying. So now you're a maternal health advocate. Is that a fair title for you? Yeah. What does that look like? What did you do? What was your plan? What did you know what you were even going to do? Yeah. So There was no plan.
No plan.
There was no plan. I'll tell you, I started writing a blog.
Okay.
And I, at one point towards the end of my therapeutic journey, I told my therapist, I said, I'd like to write a blog. And I said, I stay up all night. I've been writing a lot. And I said, because sometimes I said, I have to tell you something, but I feel like if I tell you this, you're going to press one of them buttons and a bunch of people are going to come in and take me away. And she goes, no. And I said, I don't know, because it sounds like I need to tell you, but I do feel like if I say this thing, these people are going to come in. And she said, no, you can tell me anything. I said, I hear voices. I hear voices talk to me. And then she was very calm. And she said, well, what do they say?
What do they say?
And I said, they keep writing. And she goes, okay, well, that's fine. She was like, that's good. She's like, and then we sort of talked about that. I said, no, there's an inner voice that's saying you need to write this story. Get this out of your body, Timoria, is what the voice, that was constantly this thing with me, like, come on, Timoria, tell the world about what happened to you. You're not the only person that's dealt with this. So we kind of had this joke. I was like, are the people coming now? Or am I safe? Like, no, we're good. She was like, but I do have to tell you. If somebody would have come if you had said the wrong thing. But so I had been writing for a while, and eventually I decided to do basically one summary post of just the totality of what I experienced over a year or two. Sure. And I remember walking past the kitchen, and finally I hit the publish button. I was like this, Lord, what have I done?
I know the feeling. Mm-hmm.
And immediately I started to see notifications pop up, and they were all different. So the very first one, though, was a tweet, and it was from a woman in South Africa. And the tweet said, "Dear Timoria, thank you so much for sharing your story. The same thing happened to me, but I live on a rural farm in South Africa. Can you help me?" And I think about it every single day, because I remember standing in my kitchen reading, going, I never want someone to ask me this question and me not be able to say, yes, I can help you.
Have you actually talked to that lady?
Just on the Twitter that time, and that was 2012.
Yeah.
So even back then, what I did was, and I'm thinking, like, how can I help this lady? She's in South Africa. But I went online and found some resources and shared them with her, and that was it for me. Like, once I was like, now I've got, this thing has turned and I'm addicted to this. I want to help people. I'm at the end of, that was the ending of my therapeutic journey. I felt good. I had a great relationship with my therapist, and we felt like it was a good time to terminate, and I liked her so much. I was like, does that mean we can get cocktails? She's like, no.
We can't hang out. We can't hang out. I love this.
Yeah.
I love this.
So even the people at the hospital started reading the blog. Dr. B would call me. He would be like, I didn't know you thought I was being mean. He said, that's just how I talk. He said, I'm going to change how I talk. So I would go in for my appointments, and all the nurses and the people at the reception station, they'd be like, oh, your latest post was something, girl. Because we were, so it was, and I realized, wow, this is connecting with people. But then there was the opposite side too. And I don't know if you've had this experience, people who have. There were the people who were like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? They're like, you're talking about your mental health, like are you still traumatized? I'm like,
you know what that is, though. You don't have to say it, but you know it.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing great now, which is why I can write about what happened.
Yeah.
But it really bothered me at the time, because I'm like, I had never been quiet about what happened, and people didn't show up for me in the way that I needed them to. And I wanted to be there for people through their hardest time.
Is that because that's how you are?
Showing up?
You feel like because you show up, you're expecting other people to do the same thing?
I think that I don't like people to feel alone. And it bothers me when we recognize that someone is struggling or alone, and we don't do the smallest gesture to make sure that they feel seen or heard.
That's interesting, especially because, I'm not a therapist, but you were an only child. So I'm sure there were many times growing up where you felt alone.
I'm very in tune with with what that feels like. Yeah. And I think it is a sensitive thing with me. I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're struggling with something by themselves.
And now you're in my opinion, the voice for maternal health. Talk to me a little bit about what it looks like in Georgia. What are the things that you want to change in Georgia? And even just outside of your district, right? Georgia as a whole, what does that look like?
Yeah, so Georgia, as we know, is always in the bottom 5 in maternal and child health in the country. We have had an F grade for years now in maternal health.
We still have an F?
Oh, yeah, we just got a new one. I think it's an F minus. I didn't know it would get lower, but yeah. So the March of Dimes released a report in November with another F grade. And so before I moved here, and I've been a part of a lot of research projects and advocacy all over the country on the local, state, and federal levels. And so every time we worked on a project, we always had this conversation about Georgia, and it was almost like, at least we're not Georgia, at least we're not Alabama, at least we're not, that was really, and it was very degrading to me.
Yeah.
So I would be in meetings saying, well, if we have all these resources, why aren't we sharing them with Georgia? Why aren't we utilizing these vast networks and the funding to and sharing them with Georgia? Why aren't we forming more collaborative relationships? Because we were doing so much partnership in the Northeast, the West Coast, here, there, and everywhere. But I did not see the same type of collaboratives form in the South. And so when we were looking to move, we had been in Massachusetts 8 years. And when we were looking to move, we moved first of all, we were getting tired of the cold. My kids wanted to see more Black people. I grew up in Baltimore, so we thought about going back there. But Bob, your friend, he said, if we moving, I want to be somewhere warm. I don't want to see snow ever again.
I don't blame him.
Because you guys have had snow ever since we moved here. Like every year now, you guys are getting snow. And I'm like, oops. I said, I think we brought it with us because now you guys keep getting snow.
That was me. I brought it from Chicago.
Yeah, you too. That's right. We both did. We both are the cause of this. We're going to. They're going to come after us. They know exactly who's brought this weather to them now. But it was important to me that if and when it really a matter of when, I chose to engage, that I would be able to use my full skill set and the resources. I wasn't going to move somewhere where I could not utilize all of my knowledge and skills and the resources I have in maternal health to help fix this issue. What we have here is degrading and dehumanizing and continues to cause generational trauma, and it's absolutely preventable.
That's a mouthful. Really?
Yep. I would say degrading, dehumanizing, and causes generational trauma.
Yeah. Do you feel like what you've gone through is going to cause any trauma on your daughters as well?
We've kept them, I would say, we have kept our children, I would say, away from being like what they would feel like they're the cause of what happened, especially Gigi. See, Harper's the youngest, so, she kind of will be like, oh, I heard something went down when Gigi was born, but my birth was amazing.
That's not what she said. Did she say? Harper.
That was a 19-hour labor.
Yeah.
But with no complications, but still, I'd say you're like a rotisserie chicken, just in there like, I'm like, come on.
Just get out of here. Yeah.
But, Gigi was probably around 7. I was being featured for a CNN article. And she was probably around there. She was like, this is 2017. She was 7 years old. And that was the first time we ever really told her just kind of like the kiddie version of what happened, because we weren't sure if she would hear about it in the community because it was CNN. So we knew, okay, she might hear about this in the community.
Yeah.
So, you know what she said when we told her? She said, Mom, I'm so proud of you.
At 7?
At 7 years old.
That's amazing.
Yep. And so I have tried to make sure that she understands that her birth created conversation. It has saved lives. It taught me how to become an advocate. It taught me how to engage in the community. It taught me how to, in a different way, in a way that turned community needs into policy implementation. So I tell her to look at her life as the catalyst for true change. And she should be proud of herself in that her birth was the inspiration for all of the things that I'm doing.
That's a testament to you as a mother, you and Bob, really, right? For a 7-year-old to say, Mom, I'm proud of you.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where you're like, you know, you realize that they get it, but you also don't have to tell them all the traumatic details.
Right.
And I think it wasn't until, I'm trying to think, it probably wasn't until fairly recently that I think she had heard the full story. And she's almost 16. She's 16. Yeah. You know, I think it was at my campaign kickoff. I had never told them, they hadn't heard it from me. Now they're older now, so they were Googling and stuff. Yeah. And you'll get to Harper's, you know, so she was like, wow, I Googled you, Mom. I can't believe when Gigi was born, all this stuff, and this is terrible, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, I gave a congressional testimony. And I made sure that my children's names were in it. You know, I protected them mostly. You know, I try to keep them protected from all, but I wanted to make sure they were part of that record. You know, that they were present because they are my children, and I wanted them to know you are a piece of this movement, and that both of you represent two sides of it for me. You know, one, Grayson represents me overcoming a lot of the trauma, facing it head on, advocating for other people, fighting for people's voices to be heard. And also for people who lost their mothers, you know, people who lost their children. Harper represents the other side, that, you know, it wasn't easy to say I want to have another baby, but I felt like someone was missing from our family.
Right.
And, you know, when we talked to Dr. B, because, you know, what do they call it? Geriatric maternal age. I was 35.
35, yes. Yes, 35, yep.
Yeah, so I was at 35, about to turn 36. And here he comes with this whole, you know, we need to have a conversation. Do you want to have more children? So it'd been that was 3.5 years. And I said, yes. I said, but I'm scared. You know, he said, don't worry. He said, I don't think that's going to happen again. We're going to do a lot of testing. We'll see. And you would love, this whole crew, Dr. Principe, he's another one. The Jersey guys. He was on Real Housewives of New Jersey.
Oh, gosh.
He dated Dolores. I'm like, why am I seeing my MFM dating Dolores? You know, I mean, these guys. He wears a motorcycle jacket.
Yeah,
comes in, and he walks into the office like, hey, ladies. Gives you his cell. You're like, is this okay? Is this legal? Are we supposed to be having this kind of relationship? You know, he's a really great guy.
Yeah.
So I saw him. He did all these tests. I didn't have any pre-existing conditions. That's nothing. You know, this was a fluke. I had no pre-existing conditions, all this stuff. And so then once we went through the testing, Dr. B actually, I remember him scheduling his vacation around sort of the time in which he knew I would probably be giving birth. So he knew, I'm going to be here this particular week. I'll make sure I'm here for you. So we went over all of those things. We felt like, okay, we're going to be in a good place to do this. And luckily, of course, I didn't have, knock on wood, you know, no other traumatic experiences. Harper was healthy. And but I will tell you this. When I went to see Dr. B for my checkup a few weeks later, after she was born, he pointed to a picture of his 2 daughters on the wall. And he said, you know, I have 2 daughters, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, and that's enough.
That is, it's also a testament to the relationship that you're able to build with people, right? It's like that. To me, I don't think most people have that type of relationship with their doctor.
No, and because I've had it, it's literally what I'm fighting for. I understand so much of that. Again, it's pretty unusual, I would say. Your doctor he shouldn't have been in the position to have to be a lot of surrogates for me at that time, but he just did it, right? He was a surrogate friend, a surrogate dad, comedian, whatever I needed at the time, advocate, most importantly. But your relationship should feel like you are partners in it. It should feel good to you when you go and not like, oh God, I don't like this guy. His attitude sucks. Or, you know, he doesn't speak to me well. Or this lady's short with me. You know, like I'm in and out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, they don't ask me questions. I don't get time to ask questions. I want to help people understand that they have choices. You know, and for those who don't have choices, I want to build choices.
What does that mean?
So there's a lot of places where there is no care.
Yes.
And I have been appalled by this. So out of the 159 counties in Georgia, 93 have no OBGYNs.
93 that's more than half.
Yeah.
So what do? You want to have a baby. What do they?
Driving. You're driving hours, Henry.
So you could have the baby in the car on the way there.
Have the baby. Imagine if you were me, you had the hemorrhage in the car.
You die.
Yep, you and the baby. Probably won't make it. And it is absolutely disgraceful that we're allowing people to live this way in a country which has, in a state with almost a $15 billion surplus, in which we could certainly fix this issue. We could just use a tenth of that money, would go a long way.
Well, how do you fix the issue?
We have to talk about it. We have to bring it out of the shadows. Every policy that I've worked on that's been successful is because we brought it out of the shadows. We didn't allow people to feel alone. We have to let people know that they are seen and that they're heard. I think a lot of this is people not actually seeing and hearing from the people it's happening to.
Right. I agree.
Yep.
So convince me, right? Let's say I own a practice.
Okay.
Why do I go? I've already spent $500,000 to be a doctor, right? OBGYN. Why do I go to an area where I can't actually make the money back to pay off just my student loans? Because there's not enough people there to facilitate the clinic.
Well, one part of me would ask you about your oath, right? I think that's an important piece, but also it is a business. So I would say, I think we have some opportunity there. Let's be honest.
Okay.
If you're the only Publix that opened in a town, who's going to... You gotta go to
Publix.
Right, exactly. So I do think the potential is there, but we have to show people both sides of that potential, right? That there's a duty to uphold your oath, a duty to serve your community, but also I understand the need to make money, and I think all those things are possible.
So I agree with you, and I was just asking to get it out there. I totally agree with you, and I think too, healthcare is too money driven, but I also understand when a doctor tells me, Henry, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
And I don't have to have the finest things, but I can't even pay back my tuition if I don't have a certain type of job, right? So, and that's where we start getting into, well, is this actually feasible?
Right.
Now we're talking about things like, well, maybe we could expand Medicaid.
Right.
At least they have a payer source in certain areas to help them do that.
Exactly.
That's something that you would be obviously for as well.
100%. 100%. I mean, that's something I'll be fighting for. I'll be up there.
I'm one of those people. I go to the hospitals, not, often.
Yes.
And I see so many people who voted a certain way that didn't realize they were also a part of the people that were going to lose their health care. Right. And now they have to have some education. Right. They have to be, and you still got to talk to them with some empathy.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. But that's the thing. But that's what a legislator has to do.
Yeah.
You have to be able to say you made this choice and it was not the best choice for your family, but here's how we can fix it now. But what I'm trying to do is help people not always be operating from a reactive space, from a preventative space.
There you go.
That is my biggest goal.
I love this.
That is what I've been very successful at. Where we're not like, oh no, like where's our emergency preparedness when I think about some stuff, I'm like, we have to be educating people about what we currently have available in communities, direct resources. What do you have? Then we say, okay, what's missing? We put those things in place so that we're not always like, oh my God, this thing happened. What are we going to do? So that's important to me.
What about also, because Medicaid expansion is one thing, but there are people who have insurance now who just simply can't afford it because of affordability, right? What are we doing about our seniors and how they're going to get to food? And, I got to go to the gas station when I leave here. I know it's going to be $100, right? Like, what are some of your thoughts on that, and how can we kind of fix some of those issues?
Yeah, I've been having a lot of these conversations on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
I had a woman crying in my arms 2 days ago, Henry. She's now went from paying $125 a month to $750 a month insurance.
For one person.
One person.
Yeah.
Her medicine, $560 a month.
On top of the $700.
On top of the, yeah.
You can't even. How's she gonna eat? How is she gonna eat?
I think we were talking earlier. A pack of strawberries now is $10. I'm at home. I'm not even joking. I'm rationing strawberries. Like, I used to cut them into little pieces when they were babies. I'm doing it again now. Like, don't eat too much of these.
And I got a 4-year-old who only eats strawberries. It's like, yo, give me a break. You know what I mean? No, I totally get it. Yeah. So what are we doing? Like, how are we going to fix some of these issues? Or what is it that you can do from that seat to kind of, I hate to say this, at least make everyone feel at ease again?
Yeah. So I think part of it is actually, again, owning the problem. Yeah. And you have to own it publicly. There's so much here that is done in the shadows or hush hush, like, oh, we shouldn't mention this. No, we're going to mention it all with me, because that's the only way I've been able to get a lot of things done. That's the way I was able to push my legislation through. As far as, one of the big issues that I'm concerned about is food insecurity. I'm meeting so many of our elders who they aren't even eating every day. They have very, very few resources for food because they're just trying to live on very small, checks, whether it's disability or pensions or all sorts of different things. But they also have to look at that cost of living versus food. So how are you really even living?
I agree.
Are you really even living? You're just surviving. It's like subsistent, like the most like our basic needs aren't being met. So for me, I believe that legislation is the key, because you need something that has long-term sustainability, and I actually, a few years ago, before we moved here, started researching food insecurity in our county, in Fayette County, and saw that food insecurity had increased 60% in 5 years. And then when we got here, I heard no one talking about it. And I'm thinking, this is gonna become an ugly problem. And as a policy strategist, I said 1 to 2 years, this is gonna blow up. And so 2024, I submitted a proposal on the federal level during appropriations for $300,000. It was denied. And I'll tell you right then and there, I was like, I'm gonna run for office one day. Because as an advocate, you can only do so much from the outside. You really have to be on the inside to be able to be that representative for people's voices, but also to bring them in. It's not necessarily about me standing up there and talking about the issues. I want you to see these people's faces. I want you to meet an 85-year-old, who's living with their 65-year-old child and also raising their grandchild, right? Like, I want you to, meet, two 75-year-olds who live alone and don't have family and are barely making ends meet, going from pantry to pantry to get food. These are the real stories. I'm meeting children, and I know that this summer is going to be hard for them because they're not getting those 2 meals at school every day. So where are their meals coming from? We are missing pantries in some of the key parts of our county, South Fulton and Union City. So people either have to go into Atlanta, then there's Fairburn, or they're traveling into Fayette or Noonan, So we cannot be, and pantries are great, so I'm never going to knock them. Of course, they serve a huge need.
Sure.
But when we're looking at where donations come from, so many come from people's disposable income.
Right.
So if we can no longer afford a pack of strawberries, I don't know if people have an extra money to give than the way they normally would be able to pantries. So the legislation is about creating long-term sustainability for food insecurity. We have to just write it, set an amount, and distribute it equally.
My question for you and everyone running for office is, why are they doing this to people? Like, what is it that they
hate people.
Tashina would agree with that, by the way.
They hate everyone.
Yeah. Really? Is that what?
No, I don't. Hate is such a strong word. I think that's the question that everybody asks, right? Why are we doing
Why?
The whole goal to me, I've never understood this at all, especially when you have the money, right? So I always say, having a $15 billion surplus is nothing to brag about. That's actually sad.
That is, yeah.
So you're literally saying, I have so much money, I could fix every problem in the state, but I'm just choosing not to.
What are we stockpiling the cash for, right? What is that?
It's scary, right? What are you stock? Because I would assume you certainly couldn't take it for yourself, right? Unless there's something I don't know about.
I'm just curious. I just don't understand it. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, that really bothers me. The first time I heard that number, I was absolutely gobsmacked. Because at first you kind of think like, okay, the state is huge, you don't know how much money, but when I heard 15 billion, I'm like, oh, just a couple mil with,
it would change some things.
It would really change a lot of things for a lot of people. I was at one meeting and DPH was talking about putting in-home provider care services in 20 counties. And the cost was so low, for what they were trying to do. It was under $2 million. And the fact that they had to get up there in this hearing and give this long, detailed explanation about why they needed this money. But then the other thing I was looking at was where they were putting it. So these places were in the northern parts of the state, and it's a pilot. So usually when I'm creating a pilot, I'm placing it in different parts of the state because I want to see where the need is going to work out to be more. So I'm like, why are you just focused on the one? Pilots mean I'm going to spread it out. So those are things that I'm looking at.
And you think these are things that you can actually change?
Yes, I do. I know I can because I've done it before.
What exactly have you changed before?
So before I got involved in healthcare advocacy, there wasn't really the focus on trauma. And this was pre all the, there would be all these big articles and organizations focused on Black maternal health. I had been going to DC in the early, up to 2010s, and looking at the bills that were already written and who was sponsoring them. And I think the beauty, if I can say that, of those days were that we saw bipartisan support for these bills. When it changed was when the focus became on race. Then it sort of separated. And it didn't mean that other races didn't need the same things. The problem became sort of this blind eye to the fact that it was happening to Blacks more. And so what I did was say, it's okay for us to own that this is happening to Blacks more and to stand on business and try to solve these problems. The other thing that I'm very good at, and what I've done many times, is building a diverse coalition of stakeholders. And what I mean by that is not necessarily just race, but that's important too. Because what I often found was I was one of few or the only Black sometimes in a room with doctors, insurance people, legislators, and they're making decisions about Black bodies. And I'm going, this is not okay. I'd literally be in a meeting going, where are the Blacks? And I mean, just saying it, and everyone being like, I'm like, no, if we're going to have a meeting about Black healthcare, this room should be majority Black.
Or at least some.
Yeah, majority. I stand firm. I am very firm on that. Okay. Not some.
Majority. Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because if I went into a lot of other communities, I would mostly see in policy decisions that community reflected. When it comes to Black people, for so long, the percentages of us in these spaces are so low. So it's hard for us to get into the rooms. What I've been able to do is make sure that we get into those rooms. So sometimes, even for me, we would have a meeting and I would get the agenda ahead of time. And I would Google everybody on the agenda. Then I'd email, we need to add these 10 people or I'm not coming to the meeting. And by diverse stakeholders, what I mean is doulas, midwives, OBGYNs, pediatricians, mental health, meaning social workers, psychiatrists, and therapists, as well as legislators and advocates and all those people. And also people with lived experience, both mothers, dads, and other birthing people. I want the full gamut of people in there because we're making policy decisions for all. So all those voices need to be included.
This is so interesting. You really do need to meet Shira and Jatim, the two doulas from the Star Ridge incident. I'm going to actually look into that because I think that would be super interesting. One thing that we didn't really go into too much, your mother's a nurse practitioner.
Yes.
And so that also gives you a wealth of information that a lot of people might take for granted. Can you kind of explain to people what that means when you grew up with a mother who is a nurse practitioner, especially when you've gone through what you've gone through?
I think that what's interesting for me to look at my mother's experience is that she probably chose her career because she lost her grandmother early on. Her grandmother died when she was 13. And back then, and my grandmother had my mother pretty young. And it's interesting when I hear the story now, my grandmother had my mother when she was 16, and she demanded to go to Duke Hospital to give birth.
Why?
So picture So picture this 16-year-old black girl growing up on a sharecropping farm in North Carolina, but saying, take me to Duke. But it just reminds me so much of I think it's hysterical when I think about it. You know, she's like, I demand to, because it was the best. She had the wherewithal at 16 years old to say, even though I'm young and having this baby, I demand the best. And so sometimes I've said to people, I'm running for office because you deserve the best.
You deserve the best.
I want Georgians to have the best.
I love this.
I have had access to the best. I have been instructed by the best. I've been taught by the best.
Yeah.
I want you to win. I've had successes and I've had failures. I had the successes because I learned from the failures. I know what it's like to win, and I want those wins for all Georgians. That's really like what's in my spirit and in my heart always as I'm doing this work. But my mother, it's a story of persistence, being the only black woman in her college classes a lot of times, and also wanting a better life for herself, living up to the promises she made to her grandmother that she was going to succeed and be successful. And then, I told you earlier, my grandmother died when I was 18, and so my mother jokes now sort of like, I knew you would get involved in healthcare some kind of way. I finally got you in. I got you all fashion smashing. Now it's like, oh yeah, I got, and I'm like, you got me, girl.
You got you.
Me.
She did get you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great to have her, first of all, as a historical reference.
Sure.
She grew up, with segregation. My mother's only 69 years old. And she grew up on a sharecropping farm. And so I have this.
We think it's so far away.
Right. I'm one generation. Yeah. That's it. I'm the first generation in my family not born on that farm. Everybody before me was born on that farm. So I'm lucky to have her as a historical reference for things, as well as an informational resource too. Because don't think when the kids get sick, we're not calling her too, being like, Mom, get on fit. Look at this rash. What do you think it is? Before I spend the money to go to the doctor, can you?
Gigi's got a headache, right? Help me out, Mom. Help me out. I think that's a great idea, by the way. Yeah, I'm not mad at it.
And, it's been a great joy for her watching me come into my own, as an advocate and someone that is persistent. I don't accept, as an only child and just my own person, I don't accept a lot of no, because I believe we always, like I told you earlier, when that woman in South Africa asked me that question, I do believe that answer can always be a yes, that we can help people.
Yes,
and I am relentless
in
that fight for getting that yes for people. I love it more than anything.
I love it. Is there anything I did not ask you that you want the people to know?
Not that we're going to say on the camera.
Timoria, the personality, everything, you got me. I did not expect that. And I think this is the one time where I'm going to say, I hope people can really get to see the real you.
Thank you.
You are very relatable. And for me, I can tell you care. I want to thank you for coming, and it was a pleasure to definitely have you.
I'll be back as many times as you want.
Absolutely, and tell us how we can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me at www. Do people even say that anymore? Am I still like old? Timoria.org.
Well, you just showed your age.
Timoria.org or at Timoria McQueen on Insta and Facebook.
Okay, all right. I appreciate you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a ball.
All right, thanks.